Welcome to Crafty Chemist Designs. Today I have a great project for you. But first, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so that you are alerted every time I drop a new video. On to the project. This video is part of a monthly card making hop hosted by Valley Oak Paper. Things with Wings is the theme for June 2025. Find more inspiration in the videos linked below in the description. Cut an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock in half vertically at the 4 1/4 mark. On one piece, score at 5.5 inches and fold along the score line. Take a different colored cardstock and cut a piece that is 4 inch by 5 1/4. Lay it on top of the card base, but do not adhere it down yet. While the two pieces of cardstock are layered, lay a shaped die centered on top, like an oval or a circle or a square, to create an opening in the front of the card. Run through the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine while the two layers of cardstock are together. This will make it easier to line up the cardstock later when you assemble the card. Here I am using the Everyday Arches die to make my window. Take the top piece, the decorative piece, and put it through an embossing folder if you wish. Here I'm using the Swirly Waves 3D embossing folder. This just adds a little bit of decoration on the top. This is totally optional. You don't have to do it. But look at how cute this embossing folder is. Now take a 1/2 inch by 1.5 piece of cardstock. Make it the same color as your base. Then cut a 2.5 by 4 1/4 piece of cardstock. Again, that is the same color as your base. Take the first piece, the 1/2 inch by 1.5 inch piece, and score at 1/4 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and 1 1/4 inch. This is going to make the swinging mechanism. Then take your 2.5 by 4 1/4 inch piece of cardstock and along the short end, score at 1/2 inch, 1 1/4 inch, and 2 inch. This is going to serve as your base and help keep the tent fold open. Now we are going to take a 4 inch by 5 1/4 piece of basic white cardstock and decorate it like a scene that matches the theme that you're going to use for the card. For example, if you're doing a fish themed card, decorate this like the ocean. If you are doing a bird themed card, decorate this like the jungle. I am using this background stamp of leaves since I am going to be doing a bird themed card. Do this with inks and stamps, but really don't use any 3D elements because that can interfere with the swinging element. So I'm just going to rub it along the basic white cardstock to get a nice impression. Then I'm going to use a little bit of a darker green ink, this New England Ivy from Close to My Heart, and I'm just going to sort of color in the centers of the leaves with my finger dauber just to give the leaves a little bit of dimension. I'm not going over the whole background stamp with the ink color because then that would just make all of the leaves New England Ivy. Here I'm wanting it to be, just a little bit darker in the centers. And that is why I'm using my Misty so that I can, go right over the image in the same exact spot. Now, if you notice, I didn't get a really good image on the very edges, so I'm going to cut off a 1/4 inch on both sides, just so there's no white edges. You won't really see this, but I like it better this way. So now I'm going to adhere the detailed cardstock, the one that I embossed, to the card front. And make sure that you match the openings that you cut out with the shape die. They should match perfectly since you put them through the die cutting machine together. So here I'm taking some time to line up the edges so that it's perfect. And this is why you really want to run them through together so that you get a perfect match there. Now I'm going to create my swinging mechanism, taking the 1/2 inch by 1.5 piece of cardstock, and I'm going to add adhesive to the center part only. So between the 1/4 inch and 1 1/4 inch score marks. Here I am using score tape because I want this to be pretty strong. You can use glue here if you prefer, but this score tape makes a pretty strong bond. So you can see I'm just putting together the center part, and then the 2 flaps should be all alone. Now you want to use a small hole punch. 1/8 of an inch hole punch is good. I just have a regular size hole punch, so that is what I am using. And you're going to cut a hole in the center part of the swinging mechanism that you just adhered together. So now I'm going to adhere this to the inside of my card. And again, I'm using score tape. Use something that's very strong, like maybe Stamp and Seal Plus or the Tombow green glue, to make a really strong bond, because this is going to be swinging back and forth, so get a lot of action. So you want to make sure it's pretty strong. Here I'm adding, besides the score tape, I'm adding a little bit of the Tombow glue, and that's just so I'm able to move this around a little bit before it totally gets stuck down, because I want it to be nice and in the center. Make sure that you put it so that there's a flap on each side of the fold of the card base. And you can see I didn't really leave a 1/2 inch from the top, so you can kind of see a little bit of that swinging mechanism. So keep that in mind when you're cutting your hole. Now I'm going to adhere that decorated piece of basic white cardstock that I made to the inside so that you can see it through the shaped opening. Now I'm going to cut a piece of acetate. Here I'm using a piece of transparency film that I have left over from teaching. And I'm going to cut a 1/2 inch by about 3 inch piece. Mine's a little bit longer than that, but I am going to cut it down shortly. And then I am going to hole punch that with the same size hole punch that I did for the swinging mechanism. And then I'm going to round the corners at the top near the hole. This will allow it to swing a little bit easier. So you want to take a brad and put it through the hole in the acetate. And then I'm going to thread it through the hole in the swinging mechanism. I oriented the brad so that it went in from the bottom with the legs coming out the top to help reduce the bulk and make it easier to mail. Bend down the legs of the brad to secure, but don't do it too tightly because you want this to freely swing. I put my scissors under the brad before I bent the legs down, as you can see here. That's just so that I wouldn't fasten it down too tightly. So that make sure that you have a little bit of room. And I'm using my bone folder to just kind of push those legs down. You want to test the acetate to make sure it swings freely before you move on. And you can see here mine's swinging fairly freely. Now you're going to stamp the image that you want to swing in the opening. For example, some big fish or a bird. You can see I'm using the 2 lovebirds there, and that is what I am going to have swinging. And you can see how it goes with the theme of feathers. You will end up needing 2 of these. The second one doesn't need to be colored in or decorated because you are just going to use it as a backing, and you'll see that in a minute. Okay, so I'm stamping this with, I use Intense Black from Close to My Heart, but you can use Memento Tuxedo Black. And then I'm just going to color this in with my Stamp and Blend markers. I have this sped up, and I will just play some music until I am finished coloring these. Okay, I have finished coloring my birds out, and this set does not come with a set of dies, and so I am going to hand cut these out. And what I did is I just folded that piece of basic white cardstock that I stamped on in half, and I did adhere a little bit of adhesive to keep those stuck together while I cut them out. And this is because I want the two pieces to be exactly the same size, because they're going to be stuck together front to back. If you're using a stamp set that has a die that goes with it to cut out the shape, go ahead and do that. Use the die to cut out your stamped images, and then all you need to do is die cut out a piece of blank basic white cardstock with the die to cut out the backside. Again, it doesn't need to be stamped. It just needs to be the shape. Okay? I'm using my marker to go over the edges where I cut, just so that there's no white showing from not getting it close enough to the edge. And I think I did a pretty good job. I cut it really close, and I did not leave any white showing. That was just my preference for this particular card. But if you have a die cut that you cut out, you're going to have a little bit of white image. Okay, so now you're going to put adhesive on the front side of the backing piece to the stamped image, that second stamped image or die cut that you created. And then I'm going to adhere it to that piece of acetate that's hanging down. And this is where you want to trim the acetate so that you can stick your stamped image exactly in the center of the opening. Now I'm going to put adhesive on the back side of my stamped image and adhere it to the front of the acetate, matching it up with the backing piece as best as I can. And then test that the image swings freely before moving on to the next step. Take that 2.5 inch by 4 1/4 inch piece of cardstock that you previously scored and fold it into a W shape, mountain fold in the center and belly folds on the two ends. And then put a strong adhesive on one end of the end flaps of the W piece, and we are going to adhere it to the very bottom of the card on the inside. Here I am using score tape. Okay, and then you can see how I am lining it up right on the bottom of the card, making sure that the mountain fold is facing up. Now I'm going to put another piece of score tape or some strong adhesive along the other end piece and remove it. And then I'm going to shut the card, the top of the card, down onto the bottom, making sure I'm lining up the bottom of the front of the card with the bottom of that step piece that the W that you just created. Make sure that the stamped image swings freely. Now I've decided here I wanted to add a little bit of twigs and some flowers, just to give it a little bit like the birds are sitting on a branch and maybe swinging on the trees. So I am using some espresso ink and some early espresso cardstock, and I'm going to cut it out. And this time I am leaving a little bit of the early espresso around, because this one, since it's the same color, I don't think it's as noticeable as if you leave a little bit of the white around my bird image. And these stamps are from the stamp set where my birds came from. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just giving them a perch to sort of sit on. So I'm only going to put a little bit of adhesive on the edge of the twig and glue it kind of behind the bird so it looks like they're sitting on top. And then I'm going to glue the other twig to the other side. Okay, so now you can see how it really looks like they are sitting on a perch. And then I die cut out some flowers and leaves just to decorate the twig a little bit, to give it a little bit of color. It looked a little bit too green to me. So I added some pumpkin flowers to match their little pumpkin faces that I had colored in. And I'm just trying to get it so you can see the flowers, see the leaves a little bit. So I'm going to put 3 flowers down. It's always nice to have an odd number. That's the most pleasing to the eye. And then I added 1 more leaf there. Okay, I am going to use a sentiment from the More Messages stamp set and die. And what I really love about this set is you stamp that's one big stamp with all of those sentiments, and then there's one die that cuts everything out, and you've got, I don't know, about 20 sentiments with one stamp and one go through the die cutting machine. And here I'm just going to add a couple gems. This is from the Earth Tone gem set, just to give it a little bit more decoration. And there you have it. You can decorate more if you want to. But look how cute that is. Look how cute they swing. I hope you enjoyed the project. The products seen in the video can be purchased at my website, thecraftychemist.stampinup.net. I have a Facebook group, Crafty Chemist Designs, where I go live and do demos every Sunday. I also have a Facebook VIP group, The Crafty Chemist Presents Stampin' Up. Find me on Instagram at Crafty Chemist Designs, TikTok at Crafty Chemist Designs, YouTube at Crafty Chemist Designs, and my blog, periodicallycrafty.blogspot.com.